What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. We're halfway through game week 33, but there's plenty of content still to be produced and digested ahead of game week 34. And this video, we're going to be solely focusing on Chelsea assets because they won their FA Cup semi-final and now have a double game week against West Ham and Man United in game week 34. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on those guys. And I'm accompanied by Ryan as per usual. How are you, buddy?
Oh, Ted, I've seen better days. It's not been a good FPL game week thus far for me, nor has it been a good one for you. So I think we can kind of commiserate each other tonight or this morning, your time. The decision to go Bruno Fernandes over Cristiano Ronaldo looks to be a foolish one at this stage. The hat-trick for Ronaldo, no involvement for Bruno. No bonus points either for playing centre defensive midfield against Norwich at home. Oh, it stings, that one. It really stings. So, yeah, I'm not doing too well, but looking forward to talking Chelsea assets and focusing on 34 with you.
Yeah, can we just skip right ahead to game week 34? Pretty painful for me. I'm on a net score of 4 points, and that says it all. Massive, massive red arrow, down to 23k. But I was pretty down in the dumps last night. Has to be said. Captain Blank with Sam Maximan, and he was like up top for the last 20 minutes. I was so sure he's going to get something, but it was a bit of a left field captain's choice. Wood didn't do anything, so it is what it is. But anyway, I woke up this morning with a new sense of perspective, a new sense of positivity, a glass half full approach for the rest of the season. I think I've got 9 fixtures left to play with plenty of Liverpool, Chelsea and City players left in the game week. And I'm sure the rest of you guys who have filled your teams with free hit players with double game weeks, there's plenty of this game week to go as well. So plenty of opportunity to turn those reds into greens if you're having just as bad as game week as I am. But yeah, sorry to hear about your Ronaldo 50-50 call, Ryan. It's just so unfortunate that the variance goes that way sometimes. Bruno was a very decent pick alongside Ronaldo, so it is what it is, and we'll get over it by digesting Chelsea assets in this video. But at least you're on a green arrow, mate. At least you're on a green.
Yeah, but I'm 114k, Ted. You're 23k. I'd gladly swap places with you and take the red arrow, my friend. But yeah, just quickly on the Ronaldo Bruno captaincy call, I see a few people in the chat saying, that they went the Bruno route as well. I'm disappointed with myself, and I think it's more than hindsight. We can easily look back and say, oh, Ronaldo scored the hat-trick, Bruno got nothing. But as a Manchester United fan, I don't think I paid enough attention to the fact that we have so many injuries in midfield. And we don't currently have any centre defensive midfielders really besides Matic. And so I don't think I really thought about the implications and consequences for that on someone like Bruno and what he might be asked to do in terms of playing a different role. And yeah, I think this season, more than most, we've seen that there have been some huge captaincy swings. Think about the Ronaldo Bruno take one, if you like, all the way back in game week 21, I think it was. There was the Mikel Antonio and Jared Bowen swing, the Salah versus Havertz gate back in game week 8 or 9 or whatever it was. So there have been some absolutely punishing captaincy calls. And if you've got it right, you've sorted up the rankings, and if you've got it wrong, like we have so far, you've taken a big hit.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I imagine if you retrospectively looked at your calls for the rest of the season, like Reece James in game week 28, we both had the best of that. I'm sure it's about 50-50 whether you're on the good side or the bad side of those calls. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt sometimes and take a holistic view on these sorts of things. But yeah, pretty painful in the current game week, but we'll move on and be better managers. But yes, just want to say hi to everyone in the chat box. Nice to see you, mate. And with your Ronaldo points, even though it wasn't a captain, just a dad posting stuff. Hello to you. John Cahill, how good to see you. Max R, Bernardo Santos, Chris Cullen. Yeah, great to have you guys here. Keep posting, keep asking your questions. If we have time, we'll try and get onto it. But the main focus of this stream will be to have a look at which Chelsea assets to bring in ahead of game week 34. We're going to have a look at which sort of permutations. How do we need all defenders? Do we need all attackers? One defender, two attackers, that sort of stuff. So we'll get into it in a moment. But first off, just a word from our sponsors. SoRare Academy is a fantasy game which allows you to pick 5 players: goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, and a wildcard position from the top 5 European leagues. And if you do really well, you win these SoRare cards, which are worth something. And you can play the SoRare game where you compete against other managers for prizes and stuff like that. It's like collecting FIFA Ultimate Team, that sort of stuff. So if you're into that sort of thing, check out SoRare. I think the deadline, this is an old team from last week, but the deadline is on Friday, I think, this week at the same time. So check it out on SoRare. I think it's just Google SoRare and you'll be able to find it. But swiftly on to the main subject of the video, which is Chelsea. And if it's literally going to be all Chelsea, we're not going to look at anything else today. So let's have a look at Chelsea's opponents for the rest of the season. And this is just a graphic showing all of their opponents. They've got the number above the team that they're playing is the game week in which they're playing them. So West Ham in 34, Man United in 34, then Everton in 35, Wolves in 36, Leicester in 37. Sorry, I missed Leeds in 36 for their double as well. Leicester in 37 and Watford in 38. And what this graphic shows is we're marrying those teams, their expected goals, how good they are at attacking, and expected goals conceded in the last 6 matches, i.e. how bad they are at defending. And most of these teams are top left, which implies that they're not very good at attacking and they're pretty poor at defending, which is actually music to all Chelsea owners' ears, because it seems like they're all pretty good fixtures. In fact, the only team that's in the bottom right is actually pretty surprising. And I think there is some fixture sway, there's some fixture skewness here, because I think in the last 6 matches for Leeds, they've had a relatively easy run of it. So if you fast forward backwards to some of the more difficult opposition, I think Leeds probably sit quite firmly at the top of this graphic. So the main question here, I think this answers is, do we need lots of defenders from Chelsea? Do we need lots of attackers? So this says to me, Ryan, that all the teams that they're playing are pretty defensively poor. So might be worth getting lots of attacking players. And I know you could go for Reece James and Alonso maybe, who have that attacking threat as well. But does that make you think that you want 2 midfielders or a midfielder and a forward over, let's say, going for the likes of Rudiger or another sort of centre-back with not too much attacking threat?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I think about Chelsea and their assets from an FPL perspective, I automatically go to their defensive assets, especially under Thomas Tuchel. We've seen them be more of a defensive team than an attacking team. But looking at their stats across the season, they're 3rd best in the league, only behind Liverpool and City for expected goals. So they are still a decent attacking team. And more recently, I think we've started to see them improve their attacking output as well. There's been an interesting shift in formation, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But yeah, it's a great question, Ted. Looking at this, would I go for the double attack or the double defense? Looking at this, I would go for the double attack, especially because some of those teams that we see on screen, West Ham and Leicester, for example, they've got their eyes elsewhere at the moment. These are 2 teams who, Leicester in particular, are quite focused on their European commitments. We've seen mass rotation from Rodgers already. West Ham defensively to begin the season were quite strong, but they've tailed off now. Their squad is relatively thin, and playing midweek and weekend football, I just don't think that they've got the depth in their squad to handle that. There's injuries now to key players. We've seen Issa Diop come in recent game weeks. So West Ham aren't the defensive team we thought they were at the beginning of the season, nor are Wolves as well. So there's another kind of frail defensive team. So yeah, looking at this, I'm keen to double up in the Chelsea attack. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this graphic made me think a little bit, because I think the teams at the further to the bottom, Everton, Watford, Man United and Leeds, if you ask me without any sort of statistical information about my perception of their defences, I would say that those 4 are really struggling to keep clean sheets, to concede not many goals, and that's been a theme throughout the season. Man United was so poor against Norwich defensively. Alex Tellers left so much space in behind. But this graph is showing that they're actually better, well, statistically speaking, than West Ham, Wolves and Leicester. And so if you couple that up with perception about the strength of all of these guys' defences, then actually it's a pretty good combination of teams to play for the rest of the season. So Chelsea should be pretty happy, licking their lips for lots of goals until game week 38. So I would agree with you. I think two attacking assets, maybe a midfielder and a forward, or two midfielders, is the way to go. And we're going to discuss all of the different options in a moment. But even so, if you wanted to focus on two defenders like Alonso and James, for example, we're going to talk about Alonso later and about his legitimacy, about whether his minutes are secured for the rest of the season. They're still attacking enough, aren't they, to warrant some investment from an attacking standpoint. So yes, I think basically the message from this graphic is expect goals for Chelsea and try and target your double or your triple Chelsea to best make the most of that. So yes, I want to talk first of all about someone who's made a bit of a resurgency and is going around the community on Twitter with some, there's a bit of, what's the word, knee-jerking around. And I think people are going, Timo Werner, I kind of want him in my team because it's kind of solves some forward issues. So I'm going to talk about him. And before I ask you your opinion about him, Ryan, I've got a graphic up here which shows his profile of returns for the season. He's only got 5 attacking returns. Many of those have come recently, and his 3 big chance goals, 2 of them came against Southampton in their 6-0 win against the Saints. But the other one also came against Southampton earlier in the season. So he's actually only scored against Southampton in the Premier League. But I guess the other thing we're missing is that he's played in the FA Cup semi-final and in the second leg, the Champions League against Real Madrid. Both of which he was raising eyebrows about how decent he was looking. It looks lively. He scored some goals, set up some goals. His stats are looking okay. We always think he's going to struggle with conversion, Werner, but at the moment, that confidence is peaking up a little bit. So as we said at the bottom there, that shows the opponents for the next 5 game weeks until the end of the season. We know that they're poor defensively. This graphic just shows that. So what's your opinion about Timo Werner? And would you even contemplate bringing him into your FPL side?
Yeah, I think to speak generally about Werner as a player and as an asset, and then we can talk more about whether we can fit him into our teams and the structure that we currently have. Talking about him kind of generally, Werner is for me a player who gets a lot of big chances, and his conversion rate historically has been quite low. But as I alluded to earlier, Chelsea have changed formation recently. Thomas Tuchel, his comments after the Southampton fixture were really interesting. He was talking about how they've changed their shape, and it was really just for that game against Southampton. It was kind of tailor-made to play them. But they employed it again in the Champions League and also in the FA Cup. So they've gone for a 3-4-1-2, and that's the key difference, playing the one centre attacking midfielder, if you like, with the 2 forwards. And he's got Mason Mount there with Werner and Havertz in front. And it's completely changed Werner as an FPL asset, I think. His role, and I think it's had consequences for Mason Mount as well, he's kind of making those runs in behind, stretching opposition defences. And we've seen the consequences of that in his performance against Southampton. He got the 2 goals. As you've mentioned as well, he scored in the Champions League and he assisted in the FA Cup. He assisted Mason Mount's goal. So I think if Tuchel continues to play this formation, and I don't see any reason why he won't, I think Timo Werner is a really great option as an FPL asset, because the way the team is playing now is much more suited to his strengths. I think kind of understanding that context makes him more attractive for sure. But at 8.6, he's difficult to squeeze in. If you've got, 3 budget forwards, Do you try and upgrade one of them? But if you've got someone like a Lacazette, he could solve a difficult question. Or maybe even if you've got Harry Kane, do you sell Harry Kane to drop down to Timo Werner? So as an FPL option, I think he's great, but I'm not sure if he fits into everyone's team structure at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be taking -4s to change around your team structure to bring someone like this when there would be an easier solution in Mount or Havertz in midfield to just quickly bring in. But if you are struggling with the likes of Lacazette and don't want to take 2 transfers to change a position, now I think Lacazette to a Timo Werner is actually a fairly decent move. He looks pretty lively, and we know he's a confidence player. He could have had 4 or 5 goals in that Southampton match. He missed so much. Like, he practically just had open goals, hit the post, really, really, really easy opportunities. And you can see the big chance stat there in the middle of the graphic. The orange bar. Tony has been best for big chances in the last 6 matches with 1.5 big chances per appearance. Werner is on 1 big chance per appearance, so he's doing pretty well. And the conversion with that little white box on the left-hand side shows the proportion of his big chances that he's been scoring. And roughly about 50% is about right. He's just under that, as you would expect from someone who struggles with conversion. But at the end of the day, if he's going to be having lots and lots of easy chances, and he's going to score maybe 40% of those, then absolutely fine. Good value for money. And if Chelsea, who are playing against these pretty vulnerable opponents defensively, then he could absolutely have a field day. My only reservation with Werner is his minutes. And Tuchel's comments, as you said earlier, Ryan, were pretty encouraging. He said maybe it's, the tide has turned for Werner and he can be a part of that side for the rest of the season. But Lukaku's always there. He's going to have some minutes. He's definitely not shown he's a key part of that side this season. He's having I don't know whether he's having a bit of a troubled relationship with Tuchel, but I don't think there's any real worry for him to starting 90 minutes here and there. And, as long as Werner keeps performing, I think it's promising that he might start the next few games for Chelsea. What do you think about his minutes risk?
Yeah, I mean, if things aren't working out for Chelsea, then Timo Werner is probably one of the first players to be subbed. I'm not sure about the fitness of guys like Christian Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, even someone like Hakim Ziyech, how they kind of fit into this new formation as well. I mean, he started the 3 matches that they've played in this new formation. Kai Havertz has had a rest recently. He came off at half-time against Southampton, and he was subbed, I think, as well in the FA Cup. And same for Mason Mount. So, yeah, the minutes risk, I don't know if it's as significant as what we might think, really, because Chelsea don't have European commitments. They've only got the FA Cup. So I wouldn't be too concerned, actually, with Timo Werner's minutes. Lukaku will probably still get game time, as you say. He can't continue to bench Lukaku. But in this 3-4-1-2, I mean, if Lukaku comes in, he could very well take the place of Havertz, and therefore maybe Havertz is equally at risk of minutes rotation as Werner.
Yeah, interesting. So Max R in the chat says, I'd say the preferred front 3 is Havertz, Mount and Werner. I think we both would agree with you. And let's talk about those other 2 players. Let's move on to Mr. Kai Havertz, who has actually been in pretty good form recently. 6 of his 10 attacking returns have come in the last 4 or 5 games, I think since game week 28, I think it was. He's been in really good form. That profile of chances has been, since he started playing that false 9 role, or at number 9, not a false 9, but lots of big chances. That's where most of his goals are coming from, those 5 big chance returns. And if you look at the big chance stat in the middle, you compare that to Tony, as we saw with Werner, who's been the best in the league in the last 6 matches for big chances. Havertz is pretty much there, 1.4 big chances per appearance compared to Tony's 1.5. He could easily be the best if you remove Tony. And that conversion for those big chances is actually really good, over 50%. So that's the difference between investing someone like Havertz and Werner. Havertz has been a little bit more clinical with his easy opportunities, I should say. So not too different a graphic, because they've got the same opponents for the next 5 game weeks, of course. They play for the same team. who would you? Because they're the sort of similar profile. They're often going to play up top together,
Mm,
Ryan. In that, the 3-2, whatever the formation was, two at the top. They're going
mm.
to have lots of big chances, both of them, Werner and Havertz. Who is your preference at the moment?
Out of Havertz and Werner,
Yeah.
yeah, my preference for that would be Havertz. Look at the middle bar that you've got there compared to Werner. The amount of big chances and the conversion of the big chances that Havertz has compared to Werner. I think in the last 6 game weeks, Havertz tops the league for non-pen XG. He's had the same amount of shots in the box as Salah, just one less than Ronaldo as well. So this is a midfielder in FPL who's taking shots from similar positions to the likes of Salah and Ronaldo. His expected goals is right up there as well, the best in the league, in fact. So for me, the preference is very clearly Havertz. He's cheaper, he's playing out of position, probably a little bit safer in terms of minutes, although I'd still say it's close. So yeah, Havertz for me out of those two.
I think the other very important point is that he is nailed. He's much more nailed than Werner. I think even if he doesn't play as a 9, he probably plays as a 10. I'm going to credit Gianni that, because I quite followed Gianni's advice for Chelsea. He pretty knows what's going on, but I think he's just going to play most minutes for Chelsea until the end of the season, and there's not really much doubt in that. He's been in great form, and pretty integral to the side, so he is the more secure pick for me, and the better stats say that. But of course, stats don't always mean something. If I think about the comparison between Havertz and Werner in terms of momentum, in terms of confidence, I'd say that Werner probably has a better momentum at the moment. Certainly in the non-Premier League games. I mean, Havertz got subbed at half time, I think it was, against Southampton, and Werner was left on to fill his boots. Havertz got his goal, of course, but it seems like they're maybe saving him. But in terms of Werner's been allowed to go out and really go for it, and I don't know whether Tuchel was just allowing him to play in the non-Premier League games, and maybe whether that changes when we get back to the Premier League and they play a few Premier League games in succession. That remains to be seen. So that is the only doubt about Werner. I think Havertz is more secure and his stats are better. So if you need any reason to go Havertz over Werner, then that says it all, really. So yes, let's move on to our last player out of these front three, and then we're going to take a really in-depth look at the whole Chelsea team further on. And we've got Mason Mount here, and a lot of people rating Mason Mount as the best attacking option at Chelsea, and you can see why. 19 attacking returns this season. That's 9 more than Havertz. But the profile of his chances are pretty spread out. They're pretty varied. He comes at these points from all different angles, assists, goals. Pretty bursty, I'd say. Because remember when he scored, he got 4 attacking returns in one game. I think I benefited from that, actually. He got a penalty. It was I think it was against Norwich, actually. And those were all big chances, and that's not what he's usually used to scoring. He's usually from shooting from the edge of the box, being fed in and taking a decent shot, and he's been converting them recently in the Cup, in the Champions League as well. Obviously, he got 2 goals and assists against Southampton. So the thing that he is not someone that compares to Werner and Havertz, because he's likely to get less big chances. He's likely to get a different profile of chances. He's likely to create much more. He's more of a creative player. So we've got the big chances created stat here, which is what he's arguably best at. And I did have a play around to see which of the stats was best for him. This is the one. And Harry Kane is the best in the league in the last 6 matches. You compare that to Mason Mount for the price, he's very, very good. And his teammates have been converting those big chances he's been creating for them at over a 50% conversion rate. So very, very promising for Mount, but a completely different player, Ryan. And you're going to get a little bit of a saving. I think he's 7.5 million compared to Havertz, who's 7.9. Is there any temptation to go Mount over Havertz?
Yeah, definitely. Talking about chance creation, I think whilst the goal threat for Mason Mount might be a little reduced compared to Havertz. Mason Mount has scored 14 bonus points this season, Havertz with just the 5. So his chance creation, Havertz doesn't register well for the BPS baseline compared to Mount. When Mount gets an assist or gets an attacking return, he's very likely to end up in the bonus points, whereas Havertz kind of needs to get a brace or needs to kind of get a decent attacking return to end up in the bonus points. So I think we see Mason Mount's chances created and his creativity rewarded in the bonus points. And I think that's definitely something to consider. A couple of people in the chat mentioning that Mason Mount probably has more routes to points. He's on set pieces. Chelsea are okay in terms of set pieces this season. It's not as if, they're scoring lots of goals from set pieces. They're doing kind of mid-table. So take that, as much as you want, I guess, in terms of their set piece threat. But yeah, Mason Mount, I think he's a good option. And in this new formation, I think he is emerging as a little bit of a different prospect in terms of FPL. We're kind of seeing that Lampard-esque late arrival in the box. Timo Werner stretching the defensive line, stretching fullbacks, kind of pulling them out of position, and Mason Mount taking advantage of that. He arrived late to receive the ball, scored against Palace in the FA Cup. He did the same against Real Madrid as well in the Champions League. Will we see that in the Premier League? I'm not sure, but in this new formation, I think Mason Mount is actually a better option than what we've seen across the season.
Yeah, really interesting. Because he's playing as a number 10 almost, really, as an essential position rather than a small forward almost, or maybe the right-hand side. And as you say, maybe he's just a better option. But it's interesting that he's got loads of these returns recently against the likes of Real Madrid. No shabby side at all. Like the fact that we're playing really, really decent opposition for the rest of the season, Chelsea, is really encouraging to attacking returns. And I think probably the conclusion is that you could go any of these three forwards and be pretty happy, pretty confident with returns, because it seems like there's going to be lots of chances to convert, and you just need a player that's able to convert those chances. And Mount and Havertz are particularly good at the moment. Werner's slightly worse for conversion, as you sort of expect. But if he's going to get more of those chances than Havertz and Mount, then he could be equally as good. And I personally prefer Havertz. I think he's probably more secure and he's playing further forward. He's going to get his chances closer to goal, and I think that's more predictable from my point of view. But other people might have completely different perceptions. And Mount, at the end of the day, has almost double the amount of attacking returns than Havertz in the entire season, and has done it more consistently. So it really is personal preference, I think, and depends on your team structure, depends on your budget. But yeah, Havertz for me, I'd say. Who's your favourite?
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you rank them? So you said Havertz is number 1. What happens with the silver and the bronze medal?
Goodness me, if I was being sensible, it has to go Havertz, Mount, and then Werner last. But again, it depends on your team structure, right? So if you've got a problem to fix in your forward line, then Werner becomes the priority, and that's an easy solution. But if you're one wild card and you need a preference, then I think Havertz is the most logical option. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Cool. Okay, let's move away from these forwards and have a look at Chelsea as a whole. We've got a few charts looking at different statistics, different metrics to try and get a sense of perspective about who is the priority here. Right, we've got big attempts versus small attempts here. Just going to start with the caveats. Okay, when everyone looks at these charts, they look at top right and they go, wow, Alonso, what are you doing? Okay, massive caveat here. He's only had two appearances in the last 6 game weeks, and big attempts are, they're not perfect. The definition of a big chance is that it needs to be close to goal. There needs to be a clear line of sight between the ball and the goalkeeper, and it's pretty spurious. It's not a definition. It's not completely accurate. We've had this debate on Twitter. When you look at XG values for big attempts, they're going to be varied across multiple XG values. Penalties, 75% chance of scoring those, but you could equally get a big chance which was close to goal but wide out, when it would be like a 10% chance of scoring. So I think that's probably what Alonso's had. We're going to look at the XGI charts later on, and that, spoiler alert, does move Alonso down a bit. But nevertheless, let's talk about Alonso from an FPL asset approach, Ryan. He's only done 190 minutes since game week 22 in the Premier League. Since that 90 minutes, he has played the second leg of the Champions League, 90 minutes there, and he played in the semi-final of the FA Cup. So is this now, can we expect him to play, every single game until the end of the season? I don't think there's much, competition for that left wing back spot.
No, not really. Not in the left wing back role. There's Malang Sarr who can play left back if Tuchel plays with a 4. But now he's kind of stumbled upon this new formation, or this slight change in formation. He hasn't kind of discovered this brand new formation. It's just been a slight tweak that seems to be working for Chelsea, and it seems to be working for Alonso as well. I mean, he played quite well in that Champions League game against Madrid. He backed it up again against Crystal Palace, and the way he took his goal against Southampton just kind of reminded us of what an explosive FPL asset he can be. Alonso, I don't think if you bring him in, you can expect him to play every single game between now and the end of the season. I think unlike someone like Rudiger, who's definitely more nailed, I think Alonso will miss out 1 or 2 fixtures, and you kind of feel like he's just one bad performance away from being dropped again. I don't know if he's completely got Tuchel's trust, but at the beginning of the season, there are all those comments about how Alonso trained pre-season, how he had his form, and Tuchel said, how can I drop Alonso for Chilwell when Alonso's been playing so well and so integral to how the team was performing? So I think if you buy Alonso, he's a great pick. I think he will do well, but there's that risk, and you have to accept the risk going in, is that if he has a bad game, or if he doesn't play well, or Tuchel changes formation, then he could very well be out of the team. So yeah, it depends on your risk appetite. For me personally, I really like Alonso, and I am tempted at just 5.5.
Yeah, 5.5, decent price. And I agree with you. I think it's sensible to say that he probably won't play every single game, because there is a chance with their schedule. It's only the FA Cup final they've got to play outside of Premier League, because of course they're out of Europe. So there's not going to be too much rotation. But at the end of the day, they're still playing, 4 or 5 games, 4 or 5 days gap between each game. So there could easily be rotation. And but yeah, I think Alonso's a decent option. We've seen his attacking threat. In previous seasons, absolute beast in FPL. Recently, that's died off a little bit, but nevertheless, he got his goal against Southampton. It was a big chance. I think he scored against Southampton, wasn't it? Yeah, pretty sure. I might have got that wrong. I need to just double check.
Yeah, he did. He did score against Southampton. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah.
So yes, he's been converting pretty well, and this is definitely a looking at the player through rose-tinted spectacles. I don't think he's quite better than Havertz in terms of an attacking sense, but there's just the skewness of the stats, and he's, as I said, he's only been playing 2 appearances in the last 6 game weeks. So take it with a pinch of salt. But let's look at these other guys. Havertz top right here, and this sort of backs up what we were looking at the stats earlier. Really, really good for conversion, 0.8 big returns, 0.4 small returns in the last 6 game weeks. That's compared to Mount's 0.6, 0.4, much better conversion than Mount. And then third, it's basically our order, Ryan, isn't it? Havertz first, Mount second, Werner third. I think that's the logical approach in terms of stats. But again, if you want to bring like the momentum, the confidence element in, maybe that changes somewhat. The thing that really surprises me, Ryan, is Reece James' position here. And I want to have a chat about Reece James, because I think he's been the most popular Chelsea asset for the majority of the season. An absolute beast going forward, attacking wise. He scored in loads of goals, loads of assists, but he's had his injury problems. And since his goal and an assist and clean sheet in game week 28, when we captained him, which was amazing, but he went off, missed the second game, and then since then he got subbed on at Southampton and played right centre back, and since then he's also played right centre back in the other matches, which for me, limits his attacking appeal somewhat, and probably is representing in his numbers here to some extent. Now, do we think that that is a trend that's going to continue, or is it just Tuchel catering for some pretty heavy left-wing opponents that Reece James can have in his pocket? Who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, Tuchel has done it in the past, hasn't he? Particularly when they've played Leicester, that's always stood out in my mind. Jamie Vardy with pace, getting in behind. Reece James has shifted to a right-sided centre-back in those matches. And I think he did that in the FA Cup. Wilfred Zaha playing kind of that left-sided forward player who has pace to break, counter-attack and get in behind. Reece James played right centre-back. So for me, I think Tuchel does it as a kind of a tactic to nullify the threat of the opposition. It'll be interesting to see whether Reece James starts against Arsenal this game week, whether he plays right wing back or whether he plays at right centre back. I don't particularly think Arsenal have any threats in terms of pace in behind, and Nketiah offered a little bit more than what Lacazette can do. But I just don't see the need for Reece James to play right-sided centre-back against Arsenal. So if he does play there, I'll be worried. But for me, I think that tactic is very much opposition dependent. I wouldn't expect to see Reece James playing right-sided centre-back moving forward. And I think he will return to his right wing back. But yeah, minutes will continue to be managed. And that double game week in 36, I believe it is, for Chelsea when they play Wolves and Leeds, that Leeds fixture comes 3 days before the FA Cup final. So that's a single game week for Reece James, really. So I don't know if I'd be rushing to bring him into my team if you've got him. He's a great hold. But yeah, I think if I didn't have Reece James, I'd be tempted to look elsewhere. What are your thoughts on Reece James?
I don't know. There's something nagging in my head about since he's come back from injury. I wonder whether there's been a conversation with Tuchel about why am I getting injured? Is it because of the position that I'm playing? Is it the requirement to get forward? Is it the requirement to get back? The excess strain on those limbs? Maybe the right centre-back position has been sort of a compromise to say, you're going to get your minutes till the end of the season. It's going to be a less demanding position to play. You can still get forward and cross the ball in occasionally, like maybe Rudiger does. This is massive speculation as well. Like, I really don't know. That could be complete rubbish. I'm sure Chelsea fans know about it more than me. And you could be absolutely spot on, Ryan, that it could be opponent dependent. But at the end of the day, if he starts playing right wing back again and people are reserved about bringing him into our teams, into their teams, then that's great. He's more of a differential. But you're right. If he continues playing right centre back, it's a bit of a worry for attacking returns. It has to be said.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting point around the injuries. We've seen the same with Reguilon at Spurs. The demands of playing that left wing back position week in, week out. He's broken down multiple times, Reguilon, physically this season. And maybe there's something similar in it for Reece James. It's speculation, as you say, but it's something to keep an eye on. That's why I did say I'm intrigued to see how he plays against Arsenal, whether he starts and then whether he plays right wing back or right centre back.
Yeah. But after that, as we've seen, the fixture difficulty decreases massively in terms of, we're expecting goals from this Chelsea team. And I think probably Reece James will want to be among that. So I wonder whether he starts changing or shifting position back to that right wing back for those easier opponents. Fingers crossed that's the case, because I think we both own him. And we'd like some more attacking returns, please, Reece. That would be really, really nice. And if you're going to dodge all of those points potentials, then he makes for a really sort of expensive Rudiger. Well, not really expensive. He's only like 0.1 more expensive. But at the end of the day, I want attacking players from this Chelsea team, not someone who's going to sit back.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to move on to the next graph, because the next graph is XGI, but it's exactly the same as this. I just want to compare the two graphs. Watch where Alonso moves. He moves from top right to slightly bottom left here. And it's a good indication that maybe XG is it's definitely more accurate. And it's maybe showing that the chances that he's had in the limited amount of time that he's played aren't quite as good as they may seem. But the consistencies here. So let me just talk through the chart before I talk about the consistencies. We've got the expected goal involvements across the bottom per appearance. So that's, the amount of XG they've got per game. And then across the top, we've got the XGI per attempt. That's the average quality of that chances created or shot out of all of their different chances. So it's basically the same as the big attempt, small attempt. It's just going to be slightly different because XGI is a much different model than big and small attempts, and some would argue a much more accurate model. So we've got Havertz top right here. The number above Havertz's name is the minutes per appearance. So 84 minutes per appearance. You can see that he's pretty nailed for most of these appearances. 5 appearances in his last 6 game weeks. So pretty nailed. And compared that to Alonso, he's played 74 minutes. I think it was a 54-minute appearance and a 90-minute appearance. So take that with a pinch of salt. But Reece James there, 47 minutes per appearance, 3 appearances. Not very good, obviously, for consistency, but he has had his injury worries. So you just talk about the consistencies here. Havertz is pretty much exactly the same position. Really, really good. Probably argue the best Chelsea attacking asset. We've got Werner there. Pulisic does a bit better on this chart. Loftus-Cheek does a bit better on this chart. I'm not sure anyone in their right mind is going to be bringing in Loftus-Cheek, though. The interesting thing is that Mason Mount moves down on this chart. And I think XG really punishes those players that shoot from further out and maybe construct all of these different chances with more quantity but less quality. And maybe that limits Mount's appeal. I know there's maybe some stats purists that say I'm talking nonsense, but at the end of the day, I want my players to be having these easy opportunities like Havertz and Werner are. That's a little bit more predictive for me in short periods. Like we're talking about 5 game weeks here, not the entire season. And would I be more secure about having a player that has their shots 5 yards away from goal than at the edge of the box? I'd say so. And that's the one doubt I have about Mount. Yes, he has a variety of different avenues to get FPL points, but how likely are those going to happen in this short time frame? I do wonder. So does that put you off Mason Mount a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, so is this just expected goals or expected assists as well?
Yeah, expected assists as well. So XGI is XG plus XA. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it does put me off Mason Mount a little bit, actually. It kind of confirms that Havertz is a fantastic option. And as I mentioned to you pre-stream, that's not what I wanted to be thinking going into this game week. I didn't really want to be going down the path of Havertz, but the statistics there are pretty overwhelming at the moment. Mason Mount, a lot lower in terms of the quality of expected goal involvement that compared to someone like Timo Werner. Yeah, I'm not really sure what we can attribute that to. He does offer more of an assist threat than a goal threat. And a lot of those assists or chances created are coming from set pieces or crosses, which inherently have a lower expected goal value than playing someone through and, one-on-one with a keeper. So I think that might be partly the cause of him being a little bit lower. But a big difference between Timo Werner and Mason Mount. What are your thoughts on the reason behind that?
Yeah, it's always because I've been doing these sorts of stats throughout the season, like last few seasons actually. Mount always takes up these positions, and it's because maybe the chances are devalued somewhat. But when his teammates start converting the chances he creates for them, it also raises his profile. But then it also creates a sense of overperformance in this Chelsea team, which is fine because they're all very good players. And once all of these players around him start scoring, then at the same time, Mount becomes a better FPL option. In recent years, he struggled with just creating tons and tons of chances for Chelsea and then really struggling to convert them. And that's been a theme throughout the last few seasons. So it's nice that Chelsea are actually doing really well at the moment because it does raise Mount's potential. But in terms of an XGI model, I think it does limit those that enthusiasm for Mount somewhat. Don't let it put you off too much. I think he's still an outstanding player. Maybe just Werner and Havertz are a little bit more contingent to the predictiveness of XG and that sort of stuff. So I think it's fine. I think they're all still fairly decent option. We're just looking at them through different lenses at the end of the day.
I think another thing this graph highlights quite well is the minutes difference between Timo Werner and Mason Mount. So 64 minutes per appearance for Werner, 80 minutes per appearance for Mason Mount. So we were talking earlier about the expected minutes of Werner, Havertz and Mount. They are the three, I think, from an attacking perspective that people are considering. And Werner quite clearly has the greatest threat in terms of expected minutes. Mason Mount, 80 minutes. Havertz 84, they seem to be the most nailed attackers in this team.
I mean, if we talk about nailed, we haven't talked about Antonio Rudiger yet.
Yeah, 94. Look at that.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think you could have 94 minutes per appearance. I thought it was capped at 90, but these stats are from Fantasy Football Scout members area. Go check it out if you remember, if you want to sign up to that sort of stuff and get access to this sort of this data. But anyway, yeah, 94 minutes, that's the biggest out of this Chelsea team. He's pretty nailed. He's the most nailed player for minutes. But he's, arguably the worst for expected goal involvements. And, he's had plenty of shots, but they probably all carry a value of about, 0.01 XGI or something. He scored one the other day. It was an absolute rocket. Not going to expect him to score another one until the end of the season, I don't think, but who knows? Anything can happen. If you're searching for some security for minutes, Rudiger is your man, undoubtedly, but you are definitely compromising on the expectation for attacking returns.
Yeah, I think with Rudiger, you're paying a lot for a clean sheet. And looking at the fixtures ahead, how many clean sheets do you see? I think Chelsea will struggle to keep a clean sheet against West Ham and Manchester United. There's a clean sheet potential, I think, quite strong against Everton, Wolves and Leeds in 35-36. But the double in 34 doesn't look great from a clean sheet perspective.
I mean, when we looked at the chart right at the start, and we looked at the XG for their opponents, it was only really Leeds, West Ham and Man United who were setting the pace. But again, they were sort of mediocre. All the other teams, like all of the premium teams, like Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, City, they're all on the bottom right of that chart. Loads of XG, very little XG conceded. All of the others had pretty low XG values. And I think if you look at it from a top-down view, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for clean sheets. So having two in defence, but maybe going for Reece James and Alonso, if Reece James starts playing right wing back again, I think that's absolutely fine. You're going to get the best of both worlds. I just think going for Rudiger is a tiny little bit boring. I know you're going to get more security of minutes, but the upside of that versus the rotation threat for those other players, I think, is minimal. And as we sort of discussed earlier, Alonso seems to be pretty nailed until the end of the season now. He was on set pieces as well against Real Madrid. If he misses out one game or, 45 minutes even for the rest of the season, I don't think going Rudiger over Alonso is that much of an upside, to be completely honest.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking Chelsea here, but someone who springs to mind as a comparison for Rudiger is Laporte from City. He's a little bit cheaper, not a lot, but a little bit cheaper. And I think he offers more in terms of goal threat as well. So I would be going for someone like a Laporte over Rudiger. And when we're thinking about Chelsea, I would go for Reece James and Alonso over Rudiger as well, which I think is what you've kind of suggested there.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because that's what I've done in my FPL team, but just going off the content that we've got here, the chart, it's sort of that's what it suggests. That's what we should probably go with. But at the end of the day, Rudiger's got headed attempts from corners. He scored a few over the season. Anything can happen in FPL. We're trying our best to predict it, but at the end of the day, we're going to suffer some variance. So I just want to look at one more chart from these Chelsea players before we look at the shot map for some of these attacking options. This is the over and under performance one. So we're marrying the XGI, the expected goal involvements, that's expected goals and expected assists across the bottom, and just looking at how many goals and assists per appearance they've got. That little dotted line just shows the even approach. So anything over above that dotted line means that they're overperforming. It means that they're scoring more goals and assists than is expected of them. Anything under that, they are underperforming. They're scoring fewer goals and assists than expected. And it's interesting to see here that all of these Chelsea players that we're considering are actually scoring more goals and assists than has been expected of them, which shows that they're in really good form. And it raises, as I said earlier, the profile of Mason Mount, who is more involved in everything that this Chelsea team does. So it just goes to show you can look at, the prospect of these players in different ways. And sometimes it will show, Mason Mount's not a great option. And then you look at this and you go, actually, Mason Mount's in the centre of everything in an overperforming Chelsea team. Yeah. I want him. So what do you make of this, Ryan? Havertz top right again, overperforming, but we talk about overperformance as a bad thing, but you have to allow for conversion and the ability of a player when looking at XGI as well. So yeah, is it encouraging from a Mason Mount perspective?
Yeah, it is. I think this is a really great graph to highlight Mason Mount's appeal, because as you say, when he's creating chances for his teammates, but they're below the dotted line, as in they're underperforming their expected output, then that reduces his appeal, because you're thinking, hang on, Mason Mount is creating some great chances, but no one is there to finish. I was thinking about you as I was watching the Newcastle highlights, because St. Maximin was creating some great chances, and I know you captained him, but he was creating them for guys like Almiron and Joelinton, who couldn't finish them. And it kind of, nullifies their appeal or their output as FPL options. So Mason Mount right now is playing in a team where he's creating chances, he's scoring goals, his teammates are scoring the goals that he is assisting as well, which, as you've said, and as this graph highlights, it significantly improves Mason Mount's appeal as an FPL option. So I think this graph is great for highlighting that. Yeah,
it's basically just to add as an unbiased alternate view to the last one, which really hindered his expectation for points. He is the most overperforming player here. The distance from that dotted line is the greatest, and it just highlights that as you said, Ryan, that if his teammates are doing really well with the conversion, he's going to be there to be assisting them. And all of his limited XGI figures for the chances created and stuff will be overperformed. And goals and assists will be converted from his chances. So it just goes to show XGI isn't everything. It's the conversion that really matters. And if there's a trend in that team doing really well, just get the player that's most involved. So yeah. Does it change your priority list having a look at this? Does it raise Mason Mount's profile for you above Havertz?
I don't know if it does. I think at the moment I'm undecided as to whether I have a preference for Havertz or Mason Mount. I really do want to watch that game against Arsenal, because since they have shifted to that 3-4-1-2, as we've already spoken about, I think Mason Mount has emerged. He's kind of gone up another level. He's scored the goal in the Champions League, goal in the FA Cup as well. He scored against Southampton. It's 3 goals in a row. And it's not just, fluky kind of positioning. He's making these intentional runs into the box, arriving late. And so I'm wondering if that's going to continue with Mason Mount. And if it does, then I think I would probably put Mason Mount above Havertz. But for me right now, it's very difficult to split the two.
Yeah, but I think the choice is there. I don't think either are bad options. And if you wanted to go to either, absolutely fine with that. But let's get the last view, which is the shot map for these guys. It's just a roller coaster for Mason Mount, because he doesn't look particularly good on this one, actually. This is the average shot distance from goal in tiered approach. So we've got Havertz there, who's shooting on average within 10 yards. But then you compare that to Rudiger, who is shooting over 16 yards away. I think it might even be like 20 yards, along the lines of Kovacic and Ziyech. You've got the number of shots that they've done in the last 6 game weeks underneath their names. Havertz with 15 shots, Werner with 12, Mount with 12, Rudiger with 11, and then the other guys a little bit lower than that. but the profile of those shots is distributed around the name in the green, red, and amber sort of donut chart. And the green means shot on target, the yellow means shot blocked, the red means shot off target, and the little white box around the green bit shows the amount that they've actually converted from their shots on target. If we start with Havertz, pretty healthy conversion rate from his shots on target. He's shooting closest to goal, hardly any shots off target, hardly any shots blocked. Really, really encouraging. When you compare that to maybe a Mason Mount, he's shooting a little bit further out. More of his shots are going to be off target, I think, just because of the nature of that average shot distance. When you compare those to Werner, I think this is a little bit of a bad painting of Werner. And I think you could sort of intuitively guess this to a certain extent. But a lot more of his shots are blocked, a lot are off target, and he's shooting fairly close to goal still. I wonder whether he still has the same aptitude for shifting and getting a shot off, or the accuracy of his shots slightly worse than Havertz. For someone who has a very similar sort of average shot distance. So does that make you worry about Werner a little bit?
Yeah, it does. I mean, he's taken 12 shots from that range. You'd expect him to have a higher proportion of shots on target, or at least, a reduced amount of shots that are off target from shooting inside the 18-yard box. He's almost had equal amount of shots off target as he's had shots on target. So yeah, that's a little worrying seeing Werner there. Also noticing Alonso quite high up in this graph. There's Reece James, of course. And encouraging to see Havertz taking his shots from that close in within the 10-yard kind of range. So yeah, a really interesting contrast between Havertz and Werner in particular. We were talking before about which one do you prefer, Havertz or Werner? I think throughout the stream tonight, pretty much every graphic we've seen, and in particular this one has pointed me towards Havertz over Werner.
I think he's more the logical option. I think Werner, if you think that anything in the past in the Premier League is not predictive of what happens in the future, maybe we're neglecting the Champions League matches and the FA Cup matches. If you think that those additional bits of information adds to Werner's appeal, then completely ignore these charts and just go with him. He's more of the upside shout, I'd say. But speaking from experience, from 6 game weeks ago, Havertz seems like the most logical one. Certainly in terms of goal threat. But as we've seen in the other charts, Mason Mount's appeal is also pretty varied in this Chelsea team. I just wanted to talk about the Alonso and Reece James here, because I think Reece James, quite a lot of those shots have come mainly in game week 28, and that's when he got his goal. The only shot on target in that match for him was converted. And it's a rainbow otherwise. The 3 shots, 1 was blocked, 1 was off target. So you can't expect too many shots from Reece James, but obviously he had limited minutes, and this isn't adjusted per minute or per appearance. It's just 3 shots. And if he continues to play right centre-back, then presumably that average shot distance is going to start getting lengthier and lengthier. He's going to start shooting more and more where Rudiger is, which is something you don't want. But as we've seen with Reece James, the assist appeal is definitely there. Alonso's the more interesting one for me. I think Alonso creeps in at that back post. We know that he's going to be playing left wing back whenever he plays. He got his goal against Southampton for exactly the same sort of reason. He got a goal in did he score in the semi-final of the FA Cup?
No, but he scored in the Champions League, but then it was ruled out.
Yeah. It was quite a decent strike as well. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. So late runs, shots from inside the box, maybe in the left-hand side, does raise his appeal. As being on set pieces, if that continues, that's also pretty decent. But yeah, from goal threat, we know what Alonso can do. He normally runs in front of the near post sometimes when someone's crossing the ball. So yeah, I'm quite happy about owning Alonso. We'll come to our teams in a minute. But yeah, just a final note on the 3 that we're really considering: Havertz, Werner, and Mount. As we said, all of these different graphics really point us to different ones at different times. And, I think to sum up, Werner is the upside pick. Havertz is the logical pick for goal threat. That Mount is the pick that's going to be involved in more of Chelsea's goals. And, pick your poison at the end of the day.
Yeah, I just a quick note on the Reece James Alonso comparison, which you were talking about. I just think this graph highlights the role that Thomas Tuchel wants his wing backs to play. He wants them to be taking shots within 14, 12 yards out, right? We've got Reece James and Alonso there. A lot of the stream we've talked about the double Chelsea attack. You kind of are buying a ticket to the Chelsea attack if you go for a Reece James or Alonso, because look at where they're shooting from. So it's a really interesting graphic to highlight the role of the Chelsea wingback.
I mean, when Chilwell was fit, remember that we were just saying that Reece James and Chilwell were the most important Chelsea assets. They were almost playing as forwards, just so far up. Maybe Alonso will emulate the same as Chilwell. I mean, we know how attacking Alonso is from a perception point of view. So, yeah, completely agree with you. You don't just have to go Havertz, Werner, and Mount to make the most of these attacking appeals. Alonso and Reece James also add to it, assuming Reece James moves back to right wing back. Fingers crossed for that. But yes, let's finish the stream by having a look at our Game Week 34 bus teams, and we'll start with you, Ryan. We've got your team up here: 3-5-2, two doublers, Reece James and Bruno Fernandes captain. Bruno Fernandes had a car crash this morning. Did you see that?
Yeah, he did. He escaped unscathed. It was just a bit of a praying into his Porsche.
No. I saw the photos. He seemed absolutely fine. Maybe he was just trying to satirize his performance.
He was standing next to my game week score.
Yeah, but you've opted for Fernandes captain. Arsenal and Chelsea, those are pretty difficult fixtures. Any reservations about captaining Fernandes?
Yeah, at this stage, I mean, I think I want to see what Reece James does against Arsenal, whether he starts that match, what are his minutes like, because he's definitely a consideration for captain for me. I think the fixture against Arsenal is all right from Manchester United. Arsenal have lost 3 in a row now. I was reading this article today about Arsenal, the percentage of games they've lost when they've conceded the first goal, something like 88%, which is the worst or thereabouts in the league. So they're struggling at the moment. Arsenal have got quite a few injuries as well. We know about that. So yeah, I don't think that fixture against Arsenal is too difficult for United from an attacking point of view. Of course, the fixture against Chelsea is tough, but it's a double nonetheless. Now I'm frustrated at myself because last game week, all week I was talking about going Harry Kane to Ronaldo and rolling the second free transfer. And that would have meant, forget the points for Ronaldo, it just would have meant that my team this week was going to be in a much better position. I would have had 2 free transfers. And truthfully, I would have been okay with selling Ronaldo to someone like a Timo Werner in this game week, because it would have freed up a lot of funds. It would have only been 1 free transfer, and then I could use that money to upgrade some of the other positions in my team. I mean, I'm still holding on to Doherty and Cody as well in my defense. So those are some areas that I need to address. But looking at my team right now, I'm pretty sure I'll be taking a hit. The size of that hit, I'm undecided. The players that I really want, I'd like to have at least one more Chelsea player, whether that's a Havertz, a Mason Mount, or an Alonso. At this stage, I'm leaning more towards a Havertz or a Mount. I've already got the Chelsea defender there. I don't know if I need to add a second, particularly for a hit. But the question is,
who would you remove from your midfield to accommodate that Chelsea player?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'd be quite happy to sell Barnes, to be honest. I'm really frustrated with Leicester. The progression in Europe, I thought I'd get on Barnes early, but Leicester progressing in Europe, I think there's going to be continued rotation for guys like Barnes and Maddison. I think we'll continue to see these 1-point cameos off the bench. And so I'd be quite content to sell Barnes to a Havertz or a Mount, and I can fund that by downgrading anyone on my bench, a Weghorst to a Gelhardt, for example, a Cody to a 3.8 or 3.9 defender. So that's one option, Barnes to Havertz or Mount, and then fund that by downgrading someone on my bench, and that would be a -4. But then I'm also looking, Ted, we've talked about Chelsea in this stream, but I'm also looking at City playing Watford at home. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And I'm petrified of going into that fixture without a City player, at least one. So I'm even thinking about a Cancelo or a Foden in. And to make all these changes, I've got to free up funds. So I want to hear your thoughts. If I'm going to downgrade one of my cash cows in this team, thinking about Fernandes, even though he's got a double, thinking about Son, I can always get Son back. For instance, if I sold Son, I could get Son back by going Bruno to Son the following week. It's a bit of hokey cokey, but that's an option. So those are my kind of two cash cows, but I don't feel comfortable about removing either. So I've got a lot of transfers I want to make, not much cash to do it.
So just to confirm, you don't have any chips left for the rest of the season, do you? Yeah.
Correct.
So I think if you started removing the likes of Son, I don't think you'd be bringing him back, because game week 36, where Spurs have a pretty difficult double game week, I think it's Arsenal and City, is it? Arsenal,
Liverpool, I think.
Arsenal and Liverpool. Yeah. It's a pretty tough double. I'm not sure you'd be bringing him back in advance of that when there are other teams to focus on. So I think you should keep Son. I think that Leicester game, is it in 35?
Yeah.
Is pretty key. I think Leicester, that's in between their Europa games. They're going to be prioritising that, of course. And I think they're going to be fielding a weak team in 35. And I think we all need Spurs representatives for that game, because arguably, we've just seen on the graphic earlier that Leeds' XG conceded is arguably some of the worst in the league. So Son could definitely fill his boots in that game. I know where you're coming from. You want to cover everything in specific game weeks, but thinking about it objectively, it's probably not the optimal move. And if you wanted to move stuff around to get Havertz this week, and the only way you could do it is by removing Fernandes, would that be the end of the world? I know it's a bit of a sideways move in terms of doubles, but you're also shaping the Chelsea double for 36 and making the most of the Everton fixture in 35.
Yeah.
It would also enable you to upgrade your bench Doherty to a premium midfielder, such as Cancelo or another Chelsea player as Alonso. And I know we're trying to maximise these double game weeks in isolation, but Fernandes to Havertz and Doherty to Alonso, or Doherty to Cancelo, or something like that isn't a bad idea in my book. But I think I would probably prioritise, as you said earlier, removing Barnes, because I'm not sure he's really on it at the moment. And I think Leicester are going to struggle with this rotation. How much money do you have in the bank?
0.3, so not much. I mean, I could do Fernandes to Havertz, Barnes to Mount. That's going all in on the Chelsea double game week. I'm not early in the week. I still need to kind of work out who's the bigger priority to bring in. Is it a second and third Chelsea player? Or is it a third Liverpool player, like a Robertson? Or is it a Cancelo or a City midfielder in Foden? So those are the main considerations, and I need to work out the priority. I think Chelsea's more of a priority this week, obviously, because they double. But I don't think City...
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't think I would be prioritising Robertson right now, because I think there's a major chance that he gets rested for the Everton match. That's just pure conjecture, but at the end of the day, it's being intertwined with all of these other important fixtures. And yes, the Merseyside derby, the Liverpool derby might have been a really important fixture recently, but with Everton's form, I think Liverpool could probably try and win that fairly easily without the need for Robertson. So
yeah,
I'd be prioritising other fixtures, just from my perspective, my 2 cents.
Yeah. And Tsimikas is a great replacement. I mean, you don't lose... of course, you lose a little bit because Robbo's world class, but you don't lose that much, do you, with Tsimikas?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, food for thought, because removing one double game week player to facilitate two others isn't the worst move, especially as it also future proofs your moves for the next 2 or 3 game weeks in terms of capitalising upon Chelsea's 34 double and 36 double.
Yeah.
So if that's the only way you can do it, then fine. Otherwise, you're going to have to move Weghorst down to a Gelhardt and then Barnes up to, I don't know, a Havertz or something. And I think that's a legitimate move as well. But you probably, that's arguably a better move. But it's I think always, is it taking a hit this week, by the way?
Yeah, so I've only got 1 free transfer.
Yeah, so I always find like taking a hit with those transfers just to facilitate one player. Like you're removing Weghorst and Barnes just to get Havertz, really.
That's right. Yeah, it feels suboptimal because part of the hit is Gelhardt. He's just going to sit on the bench. Whereas if it's Fernandes to a Havertz, let's say, and then a Doherty to Cancelo, I feel better about that because it means I can bench Barnes or bench Broja and I can play Cancelo and I can play Havertz. I'd probably captain Havertz if I brought him in. And I'd feel the same about captaining Mason Mount as well if I brought him in. So, yeah, on that, would you prefer, what are your thoughts on Fernandes and Barnes to Havertz, Mount / Foden? Or would you go Fernandes and a defender to get Cancelo in, for example?
I mean, we've just gone through the whole video just showing like how decent Mount and Havertz have been and will be for the rest of the season. I quite like that move, and it will probably give you an extra bit of money in the bank to upgrade the rest of your defence. I haven't done the calculations, but if that move's going to facilitate the rest of your squad, you need a cash cow. You've only got 0.3 in the bank. If Fernandes is that cash cow, yes, it's in a double game week. Yes, it might not be completely optimal. But with the limited transfers you have until the rest of the season, if you're going to take a -4, I think that -4 also needs to include some enabling for you and the rest of the season. So I would personally do that.
Good points. Thanks, Ted. That's wise counsel. Very wise counsel.
Yeah, which is why I took a -8 this week, and I'm currently sitting at a 6 million game week rank. So
but let's look at your team. Your team is so well set up for this game week.
Let's have a look at my team. I am very happy with this team, actually. But again, I've taken some pain to get here. I've got 9 players left this game week, which includes Liverpool, City, and Chelsea players, as well as the second legs for Saka and Dubravka and Saint-Maximin. So it's not the end of the world. Hopefully I can do some damage limitation for this game week 33. But for game week 34, pretty well set up. I think Captain Havertz is pretty locked. West Ham at home, Man United away. Pretty happy with that. Whether I put the vice on James or Alonso is another matter. We'll have to see who plays against Arsenal for the second, for their only fixture in game week 33. And it doesn't matter. I think Havertz is going to play both games for that. I've got representatives from City, representatives from Liverpool, Saka against Man United. I think the biggest dilemma for me is whether to play Saka against Man United or Kulusevski against Brentford. I think Kulusevski was pretty lacklustre against Brighton, or I think Brighton did a fantastic job to contain Spurs. And Kulusevski got really angry and annoyed and lashed out at Cucurella. Very, very lucky to stay on the pitch. But I thought, the Arsenal game against Southampton, Saka should have got some attacking returns. Like the amount of chances he had. Forster just denied that open goal, basically. So crazy stuff. And against a Man United defence that's pretty porous, I think probably Saka is the one that I will opt for, but happy having some bench cover if the likes of Foden gets benched, for example. But yeah, having the Newcastle guys, having Norwich away is also pretty encouraging. But otherwise, just very happy with this team. I think it's going to set me up well for the remainder of the season. I have a free hit in my back pocket. Haven't decided whether I'm going to use that. I think it largely relies on when the City double gets allocated. I think Ben Crellin said he's likely to be allocated to game week 37, but we will have to see. And I will use it accordingly even if it is in game week 36, just to maximise that. Or I could save it for game week 38. That might be quite fun.
Yeah, I think Saka's a good option. Like if he's playing on the right, Manchester United's left-sided defence looks quite weak. If Norwich can expose, I think it was Kieran Dow playing out there. If he can expose Alex Telles, I think Saka can do likewise. And yeah, I fear for what Salah can do to Manchester United's defence. Are you content with Saka? A few people are talking about potentially selling him to fund a Chelsea midfielder. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Saka?
I mean, I'm very happy keeping. I think he's arguably the best option in that Arsenal side, maybe other than Ramsdale. But I mean, you know, Arsenal have been conceding recently, so maybe Ramsdale's taken a little bit of a dive in the expected XG prevented stats. So, but yeah, I think Saka, just to show the chances he had against Southampton, he's definitely involved more than most. He's an excellent player, can score from anywhere on the pitch. Arsenal's fixtures are mixed, but they do have a double game week in 36, and I'm more than happy to have him against Leeds and Spurs in that game week 36 option. If he's the only player that can really facilitate attacking these Chelsea doubles, then maybe, but I would try and look for another player to remove. I would be adverse to removing Kulusevski in advance of Saka, to be honest, because you know, even Spurs have Brentford and then Leicester, which we talked about earlier, is a really good fixture. You know, their double's pretty difficult in 36, and we're going to have another representative from Spurs in either Son or Kane, depending on your team structure. So I would look elsewhere, basically. Saka's here to stay in my team, quality player. I won't be looking to get rid.
Yeah, agreed. Are you going to be rolling your transfer this week?
Yeah, I'll be rolling with the idea. The original intention was to move Sam Maximan down to fodder, and then who was it? Cody up to Cancelo.
Oh, I like that. Can you afford that?
I'm priced out by 0.1 because
no,
because Cody went down in price.
Of course.
So really annoying.
Went up again, yeah. So even a 4.5, you can't afford St. Maximum to a 4.5.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Do you know when Totti went down in price, right? 4.4. I was like, is he a forward? Is he a forward? This is how obsessed we are with FPL.
Yes.
I was like, I can do that Cancelo move. I think he plays for Wolves, but yeah, I haven't heard him before. He's a defender, annoyingly. But yes, I might have to compromise and bring in someone like, I don't know, Van Dijk or something, who's 6.8. Not very inspiring attacking pick though, so we'll have to see. But I guess it depends really what happens to the City double. If it's in 37, then maybe I don't need to prioritise Cancelo because I can free hit in 37. And maybe I'll be looking to sell my City players in 36 for other doublers. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I feel like I'm in a strong position, having really suffered this game week. So fingers crossed, no more red arrows for the rest of the season. But you never know. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there, Ryan. Great chat about Chelsea. Hopefully that's helped you guys in the chat decide which Chelsea player to buy. Leave a comment below if you're watching later on. Which Chelsea players? Which Chelsea players are you going to buy? Is it 2 defence? Is it 2 midfield? Are you going to go for Timo Werner? Yeah, if you haven't already, please also leave the video a like. It helps our exposure, like helping the views and stuff. Yeah, a lot of effort went into this video, so please leave a like just to show your appreciation. Really, really appreciate that. And thanks to you, Ryan, for joining me, mate. Great discussion as usual. Best of luck for game week 33, the remainder of it. And yeah, hopefully you get even more of a big green arrow.
Thanks, Ted. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, see you guys.